Good evening. This is What's Your Story? And I'm your host, James Ransom Reed, Jr. I spoke in part one about the interview with my guest and the fascinating story about the gem that exists right here in Connecticut's Crown. You may not know it, but ASD, American School for the Deaf, is definitely a jewel in the crown of Connecticut, who has been a participant in the advancement, education, support, both physically and psychologically, of our citizens who are deaf, blind, or with other disabilities. It is my privilege to have the executive director of the American School for the Deaf with us this evening. His name is Jeffery Scott Bravin. So we're so happy to have Executive Director Bravin with us to keep going into part two of the story of the American School for the Deaf. Welcome back, Jeff. You didn't go anywhere, did you? All right. Okay.
Thank you. So happy we can continue the conversation.
All right. Well, let's get right to it here, Jeff. What exactly is ASL? What is it? I know it stands for American Sign Language, and you explained in part one how it came about. But is it still the main form of finger communication in the United States?
So American Sign Language, or ASL, is the primary communication tool for deaf, hard of hearing people who rely on signing. Some people ask how it started. And when I talked about Laurent Clerc traveling to America from France, he used French Sign Language. And when he arrived, he came with those French signs. And when we established the school, there were students that were enrolled at the school from homes local to Connecticut, and they had their own home signs because that was how they had developed a means to communicate with their families. Now, there was also a very large presence of deaf individuals in Martha's Vineyard, and that was a mixture of deaf and hearing individuals. They signed all the time across the island because there was such a large number of deaf individuals on such a small island. Many of those students came to the American School for the Deaf, and they brought with them what we call Martha's Vineyard Sign Language. So we had that, we had the home signs from the local Connecticut students, and then the French signs from Laurent Clerc. All of that merged together to become what we know today as American Sign Language. And just like with English, we develop new words every year. Just like you have new English words, the same is true for signing. We have new signs that evolve and emerge year after year. And so when generations of deaf people come up with new signs, that becomes incorporated with our language, and it continues to evolve.
So a sign for, say, an item 30 years ago might be different, maybe signed differently today. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, that's exactly correct. So a sign that my grandfather used to use, so for example, this is newspaper.
Okay.
Back in my grandfather's day, this is the sign today. But within the next couple of years, newspapers might be obsolete. So then at that point, we probably will have a different sign for a different word. But also, the same is true with your voice. So let's say you're from the South. If you come from New England, or if you're from the North, you're going to have accents. Or if you're from the South, you're going to have a vocal accent.
Yes.
Signing has accents as well. So birthday, the sign here in Connecticut, this is the sign for birthday. It could also be this. It could be birthday. Another sign is birthday. Birthday. There's all different regional signs depending on where you are in the country. And oftentimes at Gallaudet University or at NTID, the National Technical Institute for the Deaf, or CSUN in California, or other large universities where deaf people come together, they bring all those regional signs with them. And over time, at their years at college, those signs evolve, and then all those people go back to their homes, and then the signs become used everywhere. So I know most signs, but once in a while I'll pick up a new sign and I'll ask somebody where it came from, and most times it came from their time at college or at school. So signs evolve and are fluid, just like the English language has evolved over time.
Wow. The when you have people who are creating these signs, generational, right? They're changing. The signs are always changing, and people are upgrading and updating their particular way of signing a specific item or thought. Excuse me. We have to talk about the 10,000-pound gorilla in the room, and that would be technology. How has technology affected positively or negatively the development and advancement of people at your school with their various types of disabilities, period?
So technology is constantly changing our lives every single day. I recall when I was a student at the Lexington School, I had what was called an analog hearing aid. And it was a large box that I wore around my chest. It was quite large. We used to call it our bra. I hope I'm not being inappropriate, but we really did. It was a large box we wore across our chest, and then there was huge hearing aids attached to it. And to try to run with it, it would just bounce off my chest. We hated it. So it got to the point where you just wanted to throw it off to the side. But all of that, we've gone from that technology to what's known as behind-the-ear analog hearing aids, and now we have digital hearing aids where it's able to be mapped to mean that it can match your hearing ability. We also have the advent of cochlear implants. Previously, we had it had 16 electrodes, and now they have over 200 electrodes to be able to map, to modify, to match your hearing ability. Now Apple just released a brand new set of iPods, or EarPods, and those AirPods can quote unquote become hearing aids essentially. This is what they're saying in their campaign just as early as last week. We have to test it out, of course, we will as time moves on, but that's just hearing technology that's evolved over the years. But what we have seen in our children, not every child benefits from that kind of hearing technology or those devices. Some children absolutely do benefit from the technology. They're able to hear, they're able to really progress well in their hearing with training and the appropriate supports, and then they go on into the hearing world and they do very well. Then we see another group of students who have no benefit from any of these kinds of devices or technology, and so they use sign language as a mode of communication. They read, they write just as a normal person would, and now technology is saying they're going to be coming out with AI, and in fact just last week there was a YouTube video that I saw a person signing into their phone, a deaf individual. The AI from the phone read the signs and was able to speak the English. And so the person who was speaking English to the deaf individual, the AI was able to have avatars that would sign back to the deaf individual. And so in theory, I'd be able to communicate directly with you, Jim, just using my phone right here. However, that still is something that is in its infancy stages, and who knows where that will go over the next few years. But those are the kinds of technology that have really changed lives. TV captioning, honestly, back in the day, I mean, now it's almost all TV programs that are captioned, but previously it required a person to physically be present typing everything that was being said on a TV program. And so they would use what essentially court reporters use, a similar device, and then the captionings would show up on the TV. And now they use AI. They use echo systems where the computer is able to hear everything that's being said and translate it into captioning. So that's something that's more cost efficient, it's easier, and it gives us more access to different things. So, technology will continue to evolve and change, but we can't say that one piece of technology is going to benefit every deaf, hard of hearing, or deaf blind person. So we just have to figure out what works. Some people like the good old traditional way. Like I like having Heidi the interpreter here because I can see her facial expressions, and based on what you're saying, I feel that connection with you. For other people, they would be fine with using a video remote interpreter on a computer. So it really does vary.
It wouldn't make Heidi very happy though, right? Heidi doesn't want to get replaced. The technology, though, we don't want to get rid of Heidi. We want to keep Heidi.
I don't think that we'll ever fully replace interpreters with technology. If we think about legal settings, medical settings, let's say, imagine there's a person that has to give birth to a child and a video screen hanging over them trying to sign. You just cannot connect with video in that kind of a moment. You're too emotional. And so we do need that human connection. We do need that kind of interaction. And the same is true with legal settings. You need the facial expression, you need the signs, you need to be able to explain things. It would be very difficult to do through video because it's not 3D. So that's something that probably will never change.
Do you have Braille training at the school? People read Braille?
So we do have deafblind students that come to our school, and we don't provide Braille training because blindness is not our specialty. We do partner, however, with both the state of Connecticut, a blind association that offers that kind of support to our students, or we partner with the Perkins School for the Blind. They are based out of Massachusetts, and they're able to do an amazing job of supporting students with vision loss. And depending oftentimes on the level of vision loss for every student, those services will vary, but we offer whatever support those children need in our school.
How did you get through COVID-19? What impact COVID have on you in the school that is still everlasting, that changed things forever? How did COVID change anything at ASD?
So COVID had an impact on everybody, not just for our school, but for every school. We were very fortunate. As I said, we have an amazing group of administrators, faculty, staff. They are dedicated, amazing people, and they were able to provide those supports to our students. We had students that went home. We were very fortunate to have a wonderful group of donors who were so generous, and they were able to give to us right away the computer and technology that we needed to have our students bring home so that they could continue to communicate with our teachers. But that experience and that journey was extremely challenging, and I want to commend our teachers aides, those staff members who had to try to work with students through an online means to try to figure out how to teach, how to show pictures, how to teach the students to read, to write, and especially when you have a student that's not just deaf but may have other disabilities as well, mobility issues. We even had some of our aides that would physically go to students' homes to provide support at home, and then the student with the staff member at their home would remote in to Zoom or whatever platform the teacher was using to connect to class. And I am just absolutely amazed by the supports that our staff were willing to extend. They did whatever was needed to make sure every individual child was supported. And not just only supporting children, but also supporting parents, because parents send the children to school so they can get appropriate language and communication access, but then parents at home were not used to having their child home every single day, and they were at a loss. They weren't sure how to communicate with their children. So we offered sign language classes, we offered different resources. We had our teachers teaching the parents. We had to, so that parents could be engaged with their children, connect with their children, and be part of the education process. Because of that, that led to us starting our online academy, because we could see the benefits of that program. It doesn't work for every child, but for some students, they truly do benefit from the online education because it's a great fit for their schedule. It is a great fit for their learning style. And for many of our students who live across the U.S. or across the world who don't have access to a deaf school, maybe the deaf school is too far from where they live, the online academy is an opportunity for them to get that kind of education that they probably never would have been able to receive prior to that. So from that journey, I think we won in so many different ways, and we became more innovative. We found ways to support more deaf and hard of hearing and deafblind children across the world.
Jeff, there is a raging debate now in many schools across the country about cell phone usage in the classroom. Many schools are taking the cell phones. Now, people who are deaf obviously could see and so forth, and kids will be kids. There are games and things available on the phones. How are you dealing with that?
Great question. And so that is a huge debate. But we do know that social media, access to information can sometimes be beneficial, but it also can be detrimental and have a negative impact on children. And so we've reviewed that because, as I said, we have many different programs at our school. For the residential treatment program, we did find that access to technology was something that was not beneficial for our students, particularly personal technology. So we've removed all personal technology. We've asked them to leave their personal devices at home, whether it be an iPhone, a laptop, an iPad, gaming systems, and instead the school will provide the technology when it's appropriate for students to access that technology. Now they still have access to that technology, but at appropriate times throughout the day and the evening in the dorms. Now for our students who are in our academic program, we've asked them to turn off their phones during the day, during school hours from 8 until 3:15. If they'd like to have access before or after school hours, that's the parents' decisions. For students that are staying on campus in our dorm program, most of them are involved in school clubs and after school sport activities. So when they're not involved in those activities, then they can access their technology, but when they are engaged in those activities, they're expected to leave the technology in the dorms. And it's been 3 weeks, and I see a positive response, not just from our staff, but from our students as well. And they're starting to say, we really don't need the technology. An hour or two of technology seems to be sufficient. And so, they may not realize it, but now that we've set those parameters and restrictions, they are seeing it, and we're seeing that it's beneficial. So we'll see how things go.
Career paths, Jeff. What career paths are open to graduates of ASD and what career paths are closed?
So I tell people, today it is hard to find teachers of the deaf. I graduated from Gallaudet University and I majored in education, and I would say in my day there was about 150 students majoring in education, and that's when I graduated. Plenty of jobs were available. I was able to easily find work, but now at Gallaudet there's only 10 to 20 people majoring in deaf education. And we have 60 plus deaf schools across the country competing for those 10 to 20 people graduating from the deaf ed program in Gallaudet. So things have changed drastically, but I think those changes have happened because of the good education we've been able to provide over the years. Also, the implementation of ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act, has helped provide open access and given deaf people rights to get into the jobs that they want. So we've done our job well by allowing deaf people to be able to do more. However, it's kind of a double-edged sword because it's hurt us in the field of education. We always find a way, and we will continue to establish different training programs and be innovative, but honestly at this point deaf people can do just about anything. We have deaf physicians, we have deaf attorneys. In terms of attorneys, that's a very big field right now. Prior to ADA, we probably only had 4 to 6 deaf attorneys, and now we have over 400 deaf attorneys across the country. So deaf individuals can be auto mechanics, they can own landscaping business, computer businesses, they can be consultants. The only thing that I can think of that deaf people cannot do is fly a commercial plane. And that's because that requires the ability to communicate with the tower at the airport and to be able to communicate with other aircraft in the air. But I would say, I think that over the next few years, technology will transform that, and I think at some point we'll be able to see deaf individuals accessing communication in the air. So eventually that will change. And now deaf people can have private pilot's license, and they can fly smaller planes, but those larger commercial planes they cannot, and they cannot join the military. That's the other one.
Cannot join the military.
No. They can work for the Department of Defense in a government office, meaning doing computer work, accounting, paperwork, that sort of thing, but you cannot serve out on the field, not yet. Yet, I want to emphasize that word.
Yeah. Are there must be some apprehension, shall we say, about having a surgeon who's deaf. Right, you're going in for like a serious operation, and it would not be uncommon for somebody to say, but they're deaf. How do they hear the nurse or whatever is going on? How do you respond to that kind of stuff?
I would say, I would talk about the story back in 1880. The National Fraternal Society of the Deaf was an insurance company that was established at that time to provide insurance for deaf people because hearing insurance companies would not provide insurance to deaf people. During that time also, they had a law that deaf people could not drive because they couldn't hear. So they fought, and finally deaf people were permitted to drive. And when that happened, they found that deaf people were actually better drivers than hearing people because they were so visual. They relied on their eyesight and they saw everything. In fact, I can see ambulances or emergency vehicles a mile away behind me. And my wife, who's hearing, won't be able to hear the sirens until maybe they're only 50 feet behind us. So I'm seeing the ambulance far before my wife can even hear it. And so essentially my eyes have really taken on a lot of the function that you rely on hearing for. And so I think the same is true with any kind of job opportunity. Previously, hearing people would say, a deaf attorney advocating for me? No way. But once you see the work they do and their ability to engage and work, I just think it's just a matter of getting that exposure, getting that experience, embracing it, and being willing to work through that. And they have really gone on to become successful people. We have deaf physicians who do amazing jobs right now at University of Rochester. They have over 80 to 100 people who are working to become physicians in different areas, from research to all different fields of medicine. And in fact, NTID and Rochester School for the Deaf, or University of Rochester, are now developing a grant where we are training deaf individuals in the field of cancer, for cancer treatments. And the American School for the Deaf is one of the schools that is going to be part of a 7-school pilot program over the next several years to work with different hospitals in treating this. And so we're very excited about the possibility of expanding the medical field for our students.
I understand that there is a museum up at American School for the Deaf. Could you talk a little bit about that, please?
Sure. So the museum, we've always had some kind of quote-unquote museum at ASD over the years because honestly, we are the very first permanent school for the deaf. We have a rich history. We have so many things. When we tore down our old building at the American School for the Deaf several years ago, we then relocated our museum to what we call our Cogswell Heritage House. And that previously was the executive director's house. And so they were allowed to live on campus. I do not live on campus anymore, but that house has now been transformed, and that is our historical preservation area where we have archives. However, we are not able to open it to the public because it's not ADA accessible. However, that being said, we do have researchers, we have some visitors that want to come and look at different historical items. We've been very fortunate. We were able to celebrate 200 years of education a few years ago, so we partnered with the Connecticut Historical Society to be able to develop a display. It was a beautiful display of our history. And that made me realize that we have to set up a museum. I'm hoping that within the next few years, before I retire, that I will be able to open some kind of site that is fully accessible to the public, that can truly display the evolution of deaf education and show how we've worked to support and transform lives of deaf, hard of hearing, and deafblind individuals across the world.
You've been very modest, Jeff. You haven't talked about programs that you innovated during your tenure. Tell us some programs or a program that you brought to the school that now is part of its everyday function.
So there are 2 programs that I'm very proud of at ASD. One is our online academy that we established 3 years ago. We started with 8 students, and we now have over 240 students in that program. And the students are not just from Connecticut, they come to us from across the globe so that they're able to get the kind of education that they may not be able to access otherwise. The second program that we've had autistic students because the spectrum is huge. And so we've had different students on the spectrum at our school over the years. But what we noticed is that there is a particular group of hearing autistic students that are nonverbal, and they're not able to express themselves. And so we tried to teach some of those students sign language, and they were able to pick up the sign language. It was amazing. And so we now have opened a program for nonverbal autistic students. So they are hearing nonverbal students who cannot express themselves. They can hear, but we're teaching them sign language so that they can then express themselves through sign language. I've had one boy who came with nothing at all, and they said, give him an iPad. He can communicate through the iPad. And this boy, was not able to use that technology. So we instead taught him sign. And now he can tell you, I'm hungry. I need to go to the bathroom. I want to go to bed. He can tell you things now that previously were such a struggle. And so those are the things that we're really able to impact lives on. And I'm looking forward to continuing to do that every single day.
In closing, what do you have to say to our public about American School for the Deaf? What would you leave as a thought for them to always remember?
As you said, ASD is truly a gem in the crown of Connecticut, but not just Connecticut, it is a gem globally, because it is very first permanent school for the deaf, where we were able to provide education here in America for deaf, hard of hearing, and deafblind individuals. Many times people say, I always pass by that building on 139 North Main Street. What is happening behind the door of that field? I would invite you to come. Take some time to visit our campus, see the amazing things that our staff, our faculty are doing every single day at the school to transform lives that people never thought possible. And I'm hopeful that we can continue to do the great things we've been doing for the past 200 years for 200 more years.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you for coming. Heidi, thank you. Appreciate it. That's all the time we have for my interview with Executive Director Jeff Bravin from the American School for the Deaf. Remember, there's two parts, so look at both parts. Everybody has a story. What is your story? And I'm your host, James Ransom Reed Jr. Thank you so much for watching. Good night.
Today, I have a very special guest, Dr. Andrew Lynn.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Veterans Corner. My name is Chuck Wooden.
Decision for ourselves for this week, if we want to be made well.
Hi, welcome to the crack of dawn. It's Dawn Lombardi. I'm starting the painting. It's going to be the clips with some water. Love it.
He took me on the sets of Lost in Space, Batman.
Everybody has a story. What's yours? Until next time.
Nick Augustino right here at the East Side Restaurant. We always have the complete full dinner menu. Knockwurst, bratwurst, sauerbraten, potato pancakes, red cabbage, rice pudding, cream pies, all the desserts that Germany had to offer. I always do something different. Yes, I do. I brought seafood to the beer garden at the East Side Restaurant. East Side Restaurant, your German destination restaurant in Connecticut. Tiki-taka, hoy, hoy, hoy!